Today I'm going to show you how I string up my tomatoes for pennies. This probably costs me less than 10 cents, but let's just say 30 cents. Now that's my power unit. It's a portable power unit, and I bought that. And that's been very handy around the yard. If you don't have one, you can take a soldering iron, if you're going to use that, plug it in inside the house, and as soon as it's hot, run outside with it, and you could probably get easily 10 holes before it cools down, sometimes even more. Now this is the irrigation tubing I use. It literally costs me 10 cents a foot, but if you only want to get a small roll, it might cost you 15 cents. This has been the most economical way to stake up tomatoes, trellis them up in the air, and it stays put. And this is why I love it. So what you're going to do, if you've already got a tomato plant growing like I did, a volunteer came up, I'm going to go ahead and put my irrigation tubing in here. Now for this one, I'm going to stick in 4, just to show you that you could do 3, you could do 4, anything you want. So now what you do is with your soldering iron, you can use a drill of course if you want, is each little post of the irrigation tubing will have 2 holes. That's because I'm going to string in my zip ties in a minute, you'll see. And that's going to hold each one really secure, and it's going to stay put. Now you can use wire if you want, and there is a rebar wire that you can get. It's like 400 feet for $10, but the point is it's real stiff. I like zip ties. You could use both. You can put 1 zip tie in, or 2, or 10, or whatever no, you don't need that many. I use 1, and it really stays, and I get a better zip tie now. It's not that it costs that much more, but you get less, but thicker, longer ones, and they're easier to work with. Now, as you can see here, I'm zip tying each of those tubings in from the inside. Now, the reason I like doing it on the inside, and you could do it on the outside if it's easier, is I like to keep that little knot inside so it doesn't get hung up on anything. It looks neater, it disappears. And the other thing is, if you were going to do it, you could use black zip ties if you're using a black pot, and it will disappear. Here I used yellow and blue, so you could see exactly what I'm doing. And each tubing there was only about 4 inches to 5 inches. Now you're done. It literally took me minutes. You could use tomato stakes, and these I get at the 99-cent store only. Still for 99 cents, it's 2 for $1. But you can also, if you want, use whatever else you have. See how nice that is? That's 4. And I also do 3. I like doing 3, but I wanted to show you can do 4. And when that plant is ready, I can stake it up. But you can, like I was saying, use branches. If you've got tree branches around, or you've got dowels that you're not using, or whatever you've got that will fit in there, go for it. Use it. That means it's free. That whole system of trellising your tomato plant will cost you really here less than 20 cents. Now here's one I did the other day because this plant just took off. Another volunteer, and I am not pulling it out. I don't know what type it is, but if it grew on my property and it is happy and came up on the deck like that, it's staying. Now here I'm going to use yarn. Now this particular pot has 3 irrigation tubings in it, and I took 3 posts and I put them in. Look how easy it is. Now what I'm doing, since the plant is starting to grow, this is the time to stake it. Don't wait till it gets too big or it's harder to do. It's much easier to do it as it's smaller. And I'm looping around my yarn, my synthetic yarn, mind you. If you use cotton or something, it will just break down like everything does in the garden, turns back in the soil. You don't want this to turn back in the soil. You want it to stay put. And so I use any type of synthetic yarn. And then later on, at the end of the season, you can just cut them off and throw them in the trash. But now you just tie it. This is the cheapest way to go. The yarn I get is at Dollar Tree. And yes, it costs $1. So look for yarn there, and you can get multiple colors. So go with whatever color you want. You can use string, but if your string is cotton, it may not last throughout the season. So that is totally up to you. And you can use wire, and you can use irrigation tubing. I've done that before, making holes and sliding it down. That would be real strong, but you know what? It looks good. It's quick and easy and so cheap. And now you just string up the whole tomato plant to your liking, whatever way it's going to work. And then you've got it ready to go. And as it gets taller, you can add more yarn or string, whatever method you're using. But see again how I loop it around each pole, and this way it holds taut. And then when I make the knot, I use what's called a surgical knot. So it's like tying your shoelace, but you're going one more loop around because that holds really nice. And then when you tie it, it just stays put. It doesn't slip, and then you tie it 2 or 3 times again. Now, I like making the cage method instead of putting a pole up the middle, because I let a lot of the suckers, as some people cut off, grow, because with smaller variety of tomatoes, those grow lots of tomatoes too. So when you create a cage like this, you can allow some of the suckers that you want to grow and then trim off what you don't want. Remember, you don't want leaves on the very bottom of your plant, because the leaves will be sitting in the soil, get wet, and could cause fungus and different things. So keep the bottom stalk nice and clean, and then decide how much growth you want on the top. Smaller tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, they do better if you leave a lot more growth. You'll get a whole lot more tomatoes. Now let's take a look at this and see what it looks like. Look at this. How cheap can you get? How better can you get? And it's really strong. It holds tomato plants really good. And remember, you can always extend those tomato stakes longer. I've got videos on that with a little bit of tape and some zip ties. Now these pots are about 1.5 gallons. Some of them are 2 gallons that I use. Keep in mind, tomato plants don't need a big 5-gallon bucket. They actually, a lot of times, will produce more tomatoes in a smaller type vessel, because what they're doing is they are putting more concentration of growth on the top than underneath, especially if you're in an area that you have a short season. Here in Southern California, if we don't get into freeze, which we have gotten into, tomato plants can go all year. Most of mine died this year because we've been in the 30s many times. So I'm just starting over, or letting the volunteers start over. Isn't this nice, neat, and clean? And see the bottom? Keep the leaves off the bottom, and then trim up what you need, and you should be able to grow a ton of tomatoes in a small space. Here we grow tomatoes in these pots as well as in totes. Totes are good too. They're 18 gallons, but if you don't have the room, you don't have to have such a big container to grow tomatoes in. Tomato plants will grow in various types of containers and raised beds and buckets and anything. But if you have a deck or a small area, or you want to grow a whole bunch of variety of tomatoes, you can use flower pots that are like 1.5 to 2 to 3 gallons. That will be plenty to grow tomatoes in. Tomatoes are really easy. Think about your season, how long or short it is. If you've got a very short season and you want to grow large tomatoes, my suggestion would be go ahead and plant some of the larger varieties, but make sure you get some of those smaller varieties in, because it takes a long time for one large tomato to ripen, and sometimes you don't get it. A critter will get it before you, and you'll only get many times maybe 2, 3, 10 tomatoes in one plant. But if you grow cherry type tomatoes, you can get hundreds on one plant, and they'll keep going and going because they're small and they ripen quickly. And that's why I find it such a benefit to grow smaller tomatoes. So here I collected all my tomatoes off that one plant. I was so excited. The only thing I forgot, to check the bag to make sure the bottom was good. With that, have a wonderful day, and don't forget to eat what you grow. Bye-bye. Oh well, at least they're still good.